Okay, welcome to the Lawyers Emotional Intelligence Book Club. We're live on both facebook.com/lawyersEQ as well as my Instagram account, which is at attorneydsy. So welcome. My name is Dave Scriven-Young, an attorney from Chicago, Illinois, and I'll be your host today. Thank you so much for coming. And this is session 13 of the book club. I invite you all to use the chat box throughout our discussion today. I was getting some feedback there. Sorry about that. And so, as a reminder, I'll be going live from this Facebook page every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central. The next couple of weeks, I have a little bit of a strange schedule just because of some family things. We're going on spring break. Going on spring break next week to DC, and we have some family stuff the following week. So not sure what the schedule is going to be, but I certainly will be letting everyone know that as well. Just welcoming everyone who's on Lauren and everyone who's coming on the Instagram account. So just remember that this club does not work without all of you. So as we go along, please contribute your ideas, comments, questions. I'm on this journey too, so I definitely look forward to learning with and all of you. And I just wanted to start out with a quote that I actually just heard on a YouTube video not too long ago, and it's a quote from billionaire founder of Alibaba, Jack Ma, who said that we should not compete with artificial intelligence, but instead focus on developing unique human intelligence. And certainly I think that emotional intelligence goes right up there, because a lot of what we do as lawyers is going to be going to computers, going to the robots, if you will. And so what I'm teaching throughout this, and hopefully discussing with y'all through the book club, is certainly ideas and skills that we can develop, that we're not going to be competing with artificial intelligence and robots, but we're going to be developing our own skills so that we remain attractive to clients, as well as developing the skills that we need in the future, because not everything we do as lawyers is going to be taken over by artificial intelligence, and the things that we can keep within our bailiwick is stuff that we're going to continue to learn in this book club. So I just wanted to welcome all of you into the club. So let's start out with, so we talked a little bit last time about how I used emotional intelligence to change my life. And as I said, I think the last time, two weeks ago, the best way that I found to learn where you are in terms of emotional intelligence is to use the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0 and the tests within that book, and look at where you're weakest and where you should start. My weakest area is self-management. So the three main things, so that my three weakest parts were: number one, resisting change; number two, letting stress get the better of me; number three, brushing off people when something is bothering me, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be taking you along on the journey to looking at my weakest parts, which I think are a lot of the weakest parts of a lot of attorneys as well, especially the stress component, the change component. And so I'm going to be learning skills, and you're going to be learning skills that you can use in your daily practice. So the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book gave us a very simple premise, which is to accept that change is just around the corner. So the first step is to admit that even under the most stable, trusted facets of your life, those things are not completely under your control. And so When you allow yourself to anticipate change and understand your options if changes occur, you prevent yourself from getting bogged down by the strong emotions that come when there is change. Things like shock, surprise, fear, and disappointment when changes actually happen. And while you're still going to experience those negative emotions, your acceptance that change is an inevitable part of life will enable you to focus and think rationally rather than being, as I say, jerked around by your emotions, because you're going to be able to focus and think rationally. That will help you to get to the solution of whatever situation and change comes your way. So you really want to set aside a small amount of time and think about what important changes can possibly happen. Then you want to write out the actions that you should take should the change occur, and then write down ideas for things you can do now to prepare. And the way I look at it is really in two different ways. Number one is, yes, do that. That's what the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book says. I completely agree with that. Think about the things that you can do to prepare if that change were to occur. But also, you want to try, if you can, to prevent that change from occurring. Some things are impossible. Big changes in the economy, changes in the legal profession. Some of the those things you can't change. Technology is always going to change. So you're going to be more on the back end, trying to get ready for the change, prepare for that change to occur. But oftentimes also, you're going to be able to hopefully do everything you can to prevent that change from occurring. So, I talk a lot about job situations, and you don't always, of course, you can't always stop a layoff or a job change from occurring, but you could do a lot to insulate yourself. You can make sure your billable hours are up to snuff. You can make sure that you're bringing in clients, doing a lot of things to prevent that from occurring. In your marriage, in your relationships, for example. There are lots of things that you can do, obviously, to insulate yourself from a divorce or a change in your relationship. Of course, sometimes things happen. Sometimes your partner goes elsewhere for reasons that has nothing to do with you. But there are obviously always things that you can do to try to prevent them from occurring and prepare yourself for the event that if it does occur. You hope that it doesn't, but you need to prepare yourself for it to occur. And it all goes through the big skill, which is to adapt to and embrace change, because change is always going to occur. So let's take that deep dive into the emotional intelligence skill of accepting that change is just around the corner. And we're going to talk through the book Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson. I don't know if anyone has read it, looked at it, but it's actually a very interesting book, and it's told essentially through a fable, right? And so what I wanted to talk to you about to start off with is what the fable has to do with is essentially cheese and mice and a maze. And so let me just switch the cameras here. See if I can figure that out. See if, well, maybe I don't have the camera anymore. Let's see. There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm still getting used to this. But so there are lots of things. So what we want to talk about first is what is the cheese here? Okay. So the cheese is what you want to have in life. So there are lots of things that we want in life that we try to hold on to. Things like a job, a relationship, money, a big house, freedom, health, recognition, spiritual peace, things like activities, jogging, golf, all of that sort of thing. Though that's the cheese. And so you really can look at, hold on for 1 second. Okay. So you really want to look at, and there's a whole list of more things that I'm sure can constitute your cheese, right? And think about every area of your life, your business, your relationships, your spiritual life, hobbies. All of those things are things that we look for and we want to have success in life at. Then you want to look at your maze. What is your maze? Your maze is the place where you spend time looking for what you want. So this is the thing that you leave the house for. And the book is fairly interesting because, we talk a lot about the rat race, right? We talk about leaving the house, going on our commute, and going to wherever we're going to go, and that's the maze. So whether that's going to work, whether that is going, if it's an activity, going to your golf club, or going on the street to go on your run, anything like that is your maze. So it's the organizations you work in, the communities you live in, the relationships that you have in your life. That is your maze. And it's a really great, the book is a very interesting way of looking at it because it's literally two sets of characters. You have the mice who are leaving their den and going to a place to get cheese. And then they have what they call little people who are essentially doing the same thing. And so just think about myself. Let me go back to the camera here. So I think of myself in this context as, a little person or a mouse, leaving my house every day, my sanctuary, my home, where my wife and my kids are, and my dog, and I'm leaving the house every day. I'm going out, getting in the car, driving, getting to the train station, taking the train in, walking to my office. And I think of myself sometimes as like a little rat who, trying to get that little piece of cheese that I hope is still there when I get to work that day, right? And I'm sure it's very similar to all of you. Now, you may not think of yourself as a little mouse or a little person, but go with me here. It is a fable, after all. Okay, so let's talk about what the book says in terms of who are you? Are you more like the mice, or are you more like the little people? So the book says that each of us has our own idea of what cheese is, and we pursue it because we believe it makes us happy. If we get it, we often become attached to it, and if we lose it or it's taken away, it can be traumatic. So every morning, the characters in the book put on their jogging suits and running shoes. They leave their homes and they race out into the maze looking for their favorite cheese. And what happens when we find our cheese? So there's, as I said, two sets of characters. One set is a set called Sniff and Scurry. They continue even when they find their cheese. So when they find their great job, they find literally something to eat. They find a great relationship. They find that they have a talent and a hobby or something like that. Well, they continue to wake up early every day. They race through the maze, always following the same route. When they arrive at the destination, they take off their running shoes and they hang them around their necks so they could get to their shoes quickly whenever they need to get them again. They scratch and scurry around, inspecting the area to see if there are any changes from the day before. They noticed the supply of cheese had been getting smaller every day, so they were prepared for the inevitable and knew instinctively what to do. So these are the people that we want to follow, as we'll see. And they're in stark contrast to the other characters who are hem and haw. Okay, These folks race toward their destination at the beginning, but a different routine sets in after a while. They awake each day a little later. They get dressed a little slower and they walk to the destination. They settle in and make themselves at home. They regard the cheese at the destination as their cheese. They move closer to the destination and they build a social life around it. They would take their friends by to see their pile of cheese at the destination. They believed they deserved this cheese. And this confidence turned to arrogance, and they didn't even notice what was happening. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the two sets of characters, because I think this happens to everyone who is in a what they believe is a great job, in a great relationship, in a great hobby. It's definitely something that people get into, and they lose the ability to understand that change might take place. So, have you ever been in a job? Maybe it's in a job you're in now, where you were very excited when you first started the job, or a client relationship, or a case, and you did everything you were supposed to do. You docketed your dates. You were very excited. You were all set to go, but then a different routine set in for a while. Maybe you got into work a little bit later. Maybe you were getting in at 8 and you were getting in now at 9. You dressed a little slower at home. You're walking to the destination. You're now trying to get there as quickly as you can. You basically, you think of this job as the job, as your job that can never be taken away from you. Maybe you build a social life around it. Maybe you take your kids and your friends, and this is my job, this is my firm. And you believe that you deserve the job that you got. I mean, I felt this way for a long time. I felt this way when I was at Big Law, before I had sort of this mindset shift, right? Where I believed, I worked hard. I got great grades when I was in school. And I really believed that that Big Law was going to, I just remember, let me just turn the camera on for 1 second. I remember when I got my first job, right out of law school. I got my did a great summer associate position, got my first offer, and I remember I was buying my first house with essentially my offer letter. Here's my offer letter. This is what I'm going to be getting. Finance this house, build a house, and thought, man, I've really made it. This is a job that's going to last forever. And I changed jobs and was at a different job, still a great job, but I felt that arrogance, and I think a lot of people do. I feel like this is going to be the job that I'm going to have forever. This is going to be the job that's going to keep my family afloat forever, come what may, no matter what happens. But as we know, the economic collapse happened. Again, something totally out of my control. But I have to be, transparent and honest. Not everyone got fired, right? Not everyone got fired from that firm. Not everyone got laid off. And so what I should have been thinking, more like sniff and scurry, right? And we'll get back to them in a moment. Let's go back to sort of a case example. Think about a case that you've had where right at the beginning of the case, everything was going perfectly. As a plaintiff or defendant, maybe you've been winning motions, maybe you've defeated summary judgment motions on the other side, and you feel very confident walking into trial or whatever, what have you. And I don't know if this happens across the country. It seems to happen in Illinois quite a bit, but your judge changes for whatever reason. You get a brand new judge who sees this case very differently from another judge, from the judge that you had, that you've been winning the whole time. Again, something completely out of your control. But now what do you do? Do you remain arrogant? Do you remain in the situation where you're feeling, wow, I've been winning, and I'm going to win with this new judge no matter what. Yes, change happened, but I'm not going to adapt whatsoever. It can happen, and I've seen this situation happen where a judge has changed and your people don't do enough to get this judge on your side, and if the judge has flipped and is now believes more the other side, because that happens. You don't know walking into a case what a judge or a jury is going to do, right? You don't know what's going to happen, and it could happen that this judge doesn't like your client, doesn't like you. And so what are you going to do? If you're like hem and haw, you're going to say, you know what, this judge, it's not right. This was my case to win. This was my client's case to win. And so what are you going to do to adapt to the change? If you're like hem and haw, you're not going to do it. You're going to sit there, you're going to cry. You're going to be like, hey, what's going on here? You're going to be lost. You're going to be traumatized. Your client's not going to win unless you make the change. So let's go back to sniff and scurry. Going back to the job example. What you need to do in your job, and of course, things change in terms of family arrangements, in terms of trains not running on time, traffic. But you still have to wake up early. And I struggle with it. Sometimes I'm working late. As y'all know, I'm a hockey referee, so sometimes I'm, late at night, roughing, and I don't want to get up in the morning. And so I struggle with this. This is, as I said, I'm learning this. I'm on the journey with all of you. Okay. So we got to continue to wake up early every day. We got to get to the maze. We got to race to work. And then we have to be prepared for change that happens. So we have to do some investigation. What is going on with this firm? What is going on with my client base? What is going on with my profession? We have to scratch around, inspect it, see if there are any changes. How do you do that? There's tons of things you can do. In your job, make sure you have an open communication with your boss, with the managing partners of the firm if you can, certainly with your colleagues. I'm not talking about spreading gossip, but I'm talking about knowing where you are and where the firm is. In the profession, there's a million things you can do to figure out what the future of the profession is. There's a whole future of the profession committee of the American Bar Association. There's technology conferences sponsored by the ABA Law Practice Division. There's a future of the profession conference that is run by, I forget what the organization is, within the Illinois State Bar. The Civility Commission, I think, might run that as well. There are tons of blogs and podcasts and articles that you can read. Get to know some of that stuff. Get to know what is coming up in the future of the profession. Because if you don't know, you're going to get lost. If you're in a practice area that is shrinking, you need to start thinking about other things to do. And there are lots of emerging practice areas, cannabis law, blockchain. Those are just two examples off the top of my head, but there are tons of things that you can learn. And I was talking to a guy today in the environmental route who said, and I agreed with them. Many years ago, Superfund was the big thing, circle. And nowadays, yes, there are still some Superfund cases. Don't get me wrong. Still a practice area, but not a practice area that is growing so much anymore. And so if you're an environmental attorney, yeah, no Superfund, but you need to know a lot of other things as well. And maybe if you're in a dying practice area, you should think about doing something else, right? So sniff and scurry. Notice the supply of cheese was getting smaller every day. So maybe you're in a firm that's dying, that's not doing well. Maybe the economic collapse is going to occur. What are you going to do? I mean, I remember being terrified as well as paralyzed when the economic collapse occurred. Paralyzed because I felt completely helpless, like there was nothing that I could do to prepare for what I thought was the inevitable, and there was nothing I could do to prevent the inevitable. And I think both of those were wrong. Both of those were wrong. I could have done a lot to prepare. I could have been saving tons of money. I could have been marketing more. Even while the collapse was going on, I could have. I run a podcast. It's called the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast, and I do something similar where I take a textbook and I put my spin on it. And we had gone through Grant Cardone's "If You're Not First, You're Last." And the interesting thing is that book was written during the economic recession, or it was a response to the economic recession. And what he said is, go for broke, especially during an economic collapse. You need to go for it. You need to advertise more. You need to gain market share. While everyone else is collapsing, the best way for you is to charge ahead. And so, that's what I would recommend. That's what I would recommend to myself, thinking back on it. So those are the characters: sniff and scurry, hem and haw. Oh, and going back to the case example, right? As soon as that judge has changed, right, you're doing everything you can to figure out what's happening. You're trying to figure out who this judge is. You're going to your colleagues. You're sending emails around saying, "Hey, Judge B has just been assigned to a case that I have. Do you know who this person is? Do you know their judicial philosophy, temperament, etc.?" And then you're doing everything you can to acclimate this new judge to the case, to get them to understand, what happened previously and why it happened previously. Why the previous judge was so in your favor is because the law was in your favor, the facts were in your favor, your client's more credible, the other client, the opposing client isn't. You need to do all of those things to prepare yourself for the change. And then when you figure out, wow, this judge is against me, this judge is against my client, then you need to have more investigation and your strategy has to change. You can't do the same thing in front of a new judge that doesn't like your client as opposed to a judge that liked your client and liked your case. So those are the characters. But what do you need to do? Well, we know that change happens. When change happens, how do we prevent ourselves from getting bogged down by strong emotions like shock, surprise, fear, and disappointment? And all of that stuff happens. All of that stuff happens, let me tell you. Because you can get down to you can get into a situation where you are having those strong emotions. You're having those strong emotions because you are so shocked that this happened to you that you can't believe it. you're so shocked that you're so shocked that the economy collapsed and you're brought down, even if you know you're ready for it. Even if not that you're ready for it, but even if you think it's inevitable. I mean, I remember, yes, it was in my mind, it was inevitable I was going to get laid off. But when it happened and in the aftermath, it was just a down world spiral. Even though had been thinking about it for such a long time, it was just inevitable. But the fact is, I didn't prepare. So when change happens, we want to be like Sniff and Scurry. And this is what the book says. They looked at each other, removed the running shoes that had been tied together and hung conveniently around their necks, put them on their feet, and laced them up. The mice did not overanalyze things. To the mice, the problem and the answer were both simple. The situation at the cheese station had changed. So Sniff and Scurry decided to change. They both looked out into the maze, then Sniff lifted his nose. Sniff nodded to Scurry, who took off running through the maze, while Sniff followed as fast as he could. They were quickly off in search of new cheese. Now, here's the question, right? How do we get to this point? To me, as I was reading this again, what really got to me, or the biggest point I think in this paragraph, is that in response to a change, Sniff and Scurry decided to change. Simple as that. It's simple, but very hard to do when you're in a situation. Where you're in a situation where you're having a strong emotion like shock, surprise, fear, and disappointment. When you're having those emotions, it's very difficult to be logical. It's very difficult to make a change. And that's what we need to do. That's exactly what we need to do in a moment of turmoil or change in our life, is that we have to change in response to the change that's occurred. Because you can't keep doing the same thing. In the book, these little people, the cheese had been moved, but they kept going to the same place looking for the cheese. And they were stamping their feet, and they're like, man, I can't believe the cheese has been moved. And they were having those strong emotions: surprise, fear, disappointment, shock. And what did they do? They kept doing the same thing. I kept doing the same thing. People who have changes in their lives do the same thing. They don't realize that they need to change in response to change in their lives. I have to change. You have to change if you're having great change in your life. So how do we get to that point? So we're going to talk about the lessons. The lessons learned. All right. Number one, having cheese makes you happy, no doubt. Having a great job, having a great relationship, having a great case and a judge who's on your side, having a great hobby, running club, whatever you want, makes you happy. The more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it. And that is definitely true in terms of a job and a relationship. Maybe a church that you go to. If it's so important to you, you're going to want to hold on to it as tightly as you can. But if you do not change, you can become extinct. In the book example, of course, if you don't get food, you keep going to a place that doesn't have food and it's been moved. You keep going back there. You can't survive without food. In terms of a job, yeah, you could probably survive. Because, we live in a society where you can, go to a food pantry or, what have you. But your professional career can become extinct. If you keep coming back to a firm that's dying and it dies, maybe you can't find something else, right? If that happens and then you don't have the presence of mind to change and open up your own shop, professional career is going to be extinct. Then you need to ask yourself, what would you do if you weren't afraid? In other words, don't be paralyzed by fear. As I said, that's kind of the worst. That's the worst scenario that you can have. Is that you're paralyzed by fear. You're so afraid to do anything that you don't do anything. You don't change. So how do you get around that? The first thing is the book says you smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old. You got to make sure that you understand where you are. You got to do an assessment of your firm, assessment of the profession, assessment of your position in your job, assess your practice area. In a case, assess your relationship with the judge, with the other side. Assess where your witnesses are, what your exhibits are, right? People die. People forget. People change their stories. So you have to do an assessment, and you got to stay with it and understand where your case is. Go to those conferences so you understand where the profession is going, where your practice area is going. You know, it's so funny because you know, a lot of people are, you know, sort of giving the short shrift, if you will, to bar associations and going to CLEs. Now it's, you know, most people just want to get their credits and check out. They don't really see any benefits in it. Or you hear it more in the context. You hear it more in the context of, you know, networking. Is it a great networking opportunity? What I think is you go to these CLEs, you go to bar association events. I'm not harping on bar. It could be anything. It could be DRI. It could be, you know, a plethora of, you know, your specialty bar associations, your, you know, sections within bar associations, whatever. But you go to these things so you know where your practice area is going, where your profession is going. It's so important. So you smell your cheese often. You move in a new direction that helps you find new cheese. Again, so this is the thing. You got to change. You got to know where it's going, and you got to change in response. And you got to move in a new direction. And when you move beyond your fear, you feel free. I mean, that is just so true, right? If you think about it, when you stop being so fearful that you don't do anything, then you're able to move into a new direction. You feel free. When you don't have any clients and you start marketing, yes, it's very difficult, and you're fearful. Let's just take that as an example, right? You're figuring out your client base is dwindling, and you know you got to do something, but you're so paralyzed by fear that you do nothing. And then you decide to change. You have that mindset shift. And you start marketing. You start talking to people. You start networking. And you move beyond your fear because you actually do something. You start to change. That is when you start feeling free. Start feeling better about yourself. You feel better about the profession. You feel better about your job because you're doing something. You're moving in a new direction. The other thing that you have to do is you have to imagine yourself in your new thing, whatever it is. The book says, imagine yourself enjoying new cheese. Even before I find it, leads me to it. So, there's a lot of talk about the law of attraction and, manifesting what you want into your life. And I'm very much for that. I don't think I do that enough. I think I do a great job at putting goals together, but I think I personally do a very poor job at manifesting and doing that law of attraction thing, because I don't know if I believe it, honestly. But I see it a lot, and I hear people talk about it a lot. Maybe it's something that, we can do more of, during these sessions. But manifesting, imagining myself, even before I find it, leads me to it. So in the book, they think about, where the new cheese is, having new cheese, enjoying it, and then they find it, right? So in our case, we're talking about you're imagining yourself in a new position, or you're imagining yourself with more clients. You're imagining yourself in a different practice area, or having a new practice area, and that will lead you to it. So you want to think about what you would gain, not about what you lost. And the quicker you let go of the old cheese, the sooner you find new cheese. That's a very good analogy, right? The quicker you let go of it, the sooner you're going to find something different. Because what's the point of wasting your time on a practice area that you're not getting any clients that's dying? The law has changed. Why are you continuing to operate that way? Let go of it. Go do something else. Your firm is dying. Your job is going to be gone. What are you doing hanging around? Get on some interviews. Try a new practice area. Go to some events. Figure something out. Think about it. Don't waste time with something that has already moved or changed. Go do something to change yourself so you can find something new. The book also says it's safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation. Again, don't waste your time. Don't stay in a place that's dying or dead or that changed already. Go put on your shoes, go find something different. Otherwise, you're going to go extinct. And old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese. So you need to change what you believe, and you need to change what you do. You can believe that a change will harm you and resist it, okay? Or you can believe that finding new cheese will help you and embrace the change. So the book gives you two options. Either believe that the change is going to harm you and stop it. Try to stop it while it's going on. Or you can believe that finding new cheese will help you and embrace that change. So I think it really depends on where you are in this scenario. When we're talking about a job, I think I truly believe what I said earlier. You need to do whatever you can to stop it from happening and to succeed, right? You want to succeed. You want to, whatever success is to you, whether that's more money, whether that it's helping more people, I don't care what it is. But you need to set a goal and you need to achieve it. Okay? And if you're succeeding in that goal, you're going to be able to stay hopefully in that situation unless there's some calamity. When the calamity occurs, if that calamity occurs, embrace it and change yourself. Find something new, right? That's what this book is telling you. And when you see that you can find and enjoy new cheese, you're going to change course. So that's what you're doing here. Okay? We need to sniff out what that change might be. We have to imagine ourselves in a new situation. We need to go for it. And then we need to change our mindset so we understand that we can find and enjoy something new and we make the change that we need to make in our lives. Noticing small changes early helps you adapt to the bigger changes that are to come, right? And again, in the economic collapse, there were so many small changes that occurred. So many small changes. Bank failures, law firms that, or securities firms that went out of business, right? Government bailouts. My firm went through 3 different waves of layoffs before I got laid off. Why didn't I see those small changes that were occurring and think to myself, I need to do something about this. I need to change. Either change my position in the firm, change firms, change practice areas, change something. Get more clients, do something. Change is coming. Change is coming my way. What am I going to do? But I didn't do that, right? And again, I'm not blaming myself. I'm not beating myself up. I've done plenty of that already. What I'm trying to explain to all of you, and I hope it's helpful, is that learn from my mistakes. You've made plenty of mistakes, I'm sure, as well. Learn from your own mistakes and notice the small changes that are occurring. Notice the big changes that are occurring in our profession. But notice the small changes as well, and that's going to help you to adapt to the bigger changes that are on their way. And then finally, move with the cheese and enjoy it, right? So again, key lessons about change. Change happens. You need to keep moving with that cheese. You need to anticipate change. Get ready for the cheese to move. You need to monitor change. Smell the cheese often so you know when it gets old. Adapt to change quickly. The quicker you let go of the old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy the new cheese. Change, move with the cheese. Enjoy change. Savor the adventures and enjoy the taste of new cheese. Let me stop there for a second, and let's turn the camera back on, because it is such a mindset shift to think about how you can enjoy the change that happens in your life. Because when you're in the midst of calamity, when you're in the midst of big changes in the profession, in your life, how do you sit back and enjoy the change? It says, savor the adventures and enjoy the taste of new cheese. How can you do that? How can you look at something like that? And I know it's a very sort of trite platitude, right? Think of this as an adventure. But when you're in the moment, it's very difficult. And what I would posit is this: when you're prepared for the change, when you have prepared yourself along the way and you've seen the little changes that have occurred, and in your mind you're preparing yourself, you can think of it as an adventure. You can think of it as something that you're going to use, not as fun. I think fun may be too much, but to savor the changes that occur. I've been watching a lot of Jesse Itzler recently. He was at the Growth Con that I went to in January, and he was being interviewed by this guy, well-known vlogger who has a YouTube show, and Jesse was essentially talking about your relationship with time, and he was saying how he was asking this guy was interviewing him, well, how many times do you see your parents per year? And the guy, I think they probably live in different parts of the country or whatever. And he said, well, I see them about 2 to 3 times a year. And then Jesse said, well, no, that's not right. Think about this. You know, assuming you only have, I don't know, if they're older, right? This guy was probably in his 40s. You know, so think about your parents are what, 60. Think about how many times you're actually going to see them. So you're wrong. You don't see them 3 times a year, but you actually are only going to see them 15 more times, and that's it, right? So just thinking about sort of that mindset shift is critical. And here, if you prepare yourself for that eventuality, you prepare for yourself that, look, I'm only going to see my parents 16 more times ever. What am I going to do when I see them? You know, big changes are coming in the economy. How am I going to live each day? How am I going to, what am I going to do when I walk into work? In terms of being prepared for what I do every day and for the changes that are going to come into my life. How am I going to act? How am I going to react to change? How am I going to react with what's going on? Right? So it's a complete mindset shift. I don't have all the answers sitting here. And I would love to hear your comments either now or after, you know, when this video gets posted. But to me, I think it's one of the most important things that we can do, and something that I'm learning over time, which is when I'm thinking about day-to-day things in my life and change that occurs, how can I change that mindset? So yes, bad things are happening around me. How can I look at it and say, well, actually, this is an adventure and enjoy it, rather than it being something that's going to be, you know, critically terrible in my life. Having those emotions. Maybe it is just as easy as preparing myself, taking the small steps like the book says. You get to that point of enjoying it. To me, it's very difficult to get to that point. But hopefully, learning these emotional intelligence skills, I'll get to there. I'll get to that point. So anyway, and then the final step, I'm going to go back to the slides here, which is to be ready to change quickly and enjoy it again and again. You're going to keep moving with the cheese. You're going to know what change is coming your way, and you're going to change with it. So very quickly, we have about 6 minutes left here, and we did all of this a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not going to go through it in any detail, but you know, how do I change my resistance to change? Well, I prepare myself for you know, a layoff or a job change, prepare myself financially, and then I do everything that I can to prevent it from happening. I set 10x goals on every facet of my life. And yeah, I mean, even I can prepare as much as I want, but change is going to happen. It's inevitable, right? So the question is, how are we going to prepare ourselves for the changes that occur? What are we going to do to prevent it from happening if we can? How are we going to change? How are we going to prepare ourselves for when it happens? How are we going to change our mindset so when it does happen, we can enjoy it instead of feeling those really strong emotions that stop us from being paralyzed by fear? Those are all great questions that I think this book posits or asks us, you know. And I think there's lots of things that we can do, including, you know, I talk a lot about, you know, learning, going to CLE sessions, preparing yourself, right? Knowing what's coming up, learning new technologies, learning about blockchain, like really learning about it, not just saying, okay, well, blockchain is out there I don't know anything about it except that it has to do something to do with Bitcoin, but that's it. That's basically what I know, right? But learning more and more about it, so you actually have a deeper knowledge of it, so you know how to change in response to it. That is where we need to be. So what I'm going to be doing with this channel and with my podcasts and everything that I do online is to start sharing some of that information, sharing with you some of the technological aspects of the profession, changes, um, client changes, all those sorts of developments, and then looking at the mindset shifts that we need to make as well. And I would love to hear, your additional comments and questions and thoughts as we move forward. Because yes, I can do all this learning on my own, but I would love to hear from all of you as well. All right, so what I'm going to leave you with today, and I really appreciate you watching, listening, is what changes do you need to make in your life? What changes are you facing personally, and what changes do you need to make, either to prepare for a change that is going to happen or that is happening to you, or what changes do you need to make to prevent it if you possibly can? Because remember, and I think this is so critical, when change happens, when change around you happens, you need to look at yourself and think, what do I need to change personally? What changes do I need to make in a response? And I will leave you with this, and this is going to be sort of the tagline. Emotional intelligence is necessary for all lawyers, and we can learn these skills together. So as I said, what we're going to do is I'm going to put out the schedule for the next couple of weeks. What I think I might do is definitely take next week off because I'm going on spring break. And it's going to be very, very tough for me to set a set thing. But the following week, maybe we'll do like a noon session on that Wednesday, as opposed to trying to do something that night. And then we're just going to go back to the normal 7 p.m. schedule, unless people would prefer noon. I'm open to suggestions, of course. So thank you all very much for joining me, and I hope everyone has a really great night. Take care, everybody.